All right, so we did a quick survey and in Lex Dei, and we actually asked the question, where do you usually get your information from? Actually, not surprisingly, 88.4% social media. But what surprised me more is that 79.1% are actually from news websites and then 46.5% from TV. So yung tatanungin ko dyan to our respondents is, anong news website ba yan? Tama bang website yan? What do you think about that, Ted?
It's a pretty high number, but I think my question also would be, how much time do they spend on the news website, no? Baka kasi headline lang. Once mabasa nila headline, ayaw nila, move on na sila, di ba? Maybe when they answer the question, that's where they get the information from, but we don't know kung talagang binasa nila yung storya.
Yung mga one photo lang na breaking news, tapos yun ang mabasahin nila.
Yes, exactly. So
Counted na pala yun.
baka TLDR. There's a second poll though, and this one is also a bit surprising. No? The poll asked, have you ever been fooled by fake news, thinking it's real news? Out of 43 responses, 60.5% said no, never, because I question everything. So for me, that's a surprising number because it's more than 50%. No? It's a very high number. So if that's an accurate reflection, then that means walang effect ang fake news.
Like, wait, totoo ba? Alright, with the 60.5% said that they weren't fooled by fake news ever. I can probably consider myself, I've been fooled a couple times. Nadadala ka talaga sa clickbait title. Especially yung mga quotes with the face. Because it looks so legit. And that's our topic today, actually. So I'd like to welcome everybody to Lex Dei Podcast, where we ask tough questions and get real answers. I'm Martha from Christ Youth in Action, and we're on our second season of Lex Dei. And welcome, everybody, to another episode. We're back.
And I'm Atty. I'm a lawyer and a law teacher, and we take a look at things through the lenses of Lex, meaning law, or the Constitution and other laws passed by Congress.
And Dei, meaning of God or the Christian teachings. So from the survey, you know that 39.5 are prone to being fooled, and I've said I myself probably fit into that percentage. But before we go into this very relevant and heated topic, and before we get triggered by just the word fake news, maybe we can define what fake news is.
Yes, that's right. And it's a good thing that you added that trigger warning, Martha. No? The more specific term is actually disinformation. And because disinformation covers not just news, but also data and information. No? Disinformation is really part of a spectrum that includes two other terms, misinformation and malinformation. In our discussion in this episode tonight, we're going to focus on or zero in on disinformation.
Right, and disinformation is actually a relatively new word to me and quite a intimidating word. So let's define that a little bit for our listeners. So disinformation is actually false information deliberately and often covertly spread in order to influence public opinion or obscure the truth. So we said we wanted to zero in on disinformation, right? I think the three words that you mentioned, misinformation, disinformation, and malinformation are all very big words. But quite interesting kasi nga, yung alam lang natin lahat is, fake news yan. Pero bringing in these big words, which I think we should all learn, of course, in the spirit of wanting to be informed. So we start with misinformation, right? It's really unintentional siya. Whereas disinformation, yung kinukuha lang yung certain lines or they piece together. Kumbaga, they change the whole narrative nga, diba? To make it understandable, more easily understandable to people. But the dangerous part is, may intention sila. May intention to fabricate nga, diba? And then malinformation is really the pinaka-worst side. May intent na to harm. And those three things are something that we really wanted to zone into. But specifically how we as normal people who just want to stay updated, what is happening in our country so easily fall into the trap of everyone that is feeding us disinformation, and even people that can spread malinformation. I remember before when I was in high school, yung nagte-text sila na, oh, may bomb daw sa Glorieta or
Yes.
Greenbelt. Di ba? Kasama ba yun? Is that, that's the
Yeah.
only example that I can think of, right?
I think that's a good example, no? It can range from that na it can be a prank, no?
Oo.
In that sense, na harmless prank, no? Harmless in the sense na wala naman talagang balak mang-injure. But it can also be a prank that can lead to, very dangerous consequences. For example, no? So it can cause panic. But if you were to look at the spectrum nga, misinformation on one end and then malinformation on the other end and disinformation in somewhere in the middle, if we look at the falsity, no, yung pinaka less false, no, is really misinformation. Kasi posible yun, harmless error, nagkamali ng date, no? And then na-publish, so may na-mislead pero nagkamali yung date. Or na-misquote, no? Nagbago. On the other end, in terms of falsity and intent to harm, pinakagrabe yung malinformation. Kasi yun sadya yun. Nire-release yung private number, for example, ng tao, details, or for example, ilalagay yung address ng tao. Sabihin, kuyugin nyo to, nandito siya nakatira, kuyugin nyo to, no?
Yeah.
And so, hindi dapat lumabas yun. But somewhere in the middle is disinformation. And when we talk about disinformation, it can contain a parcel of truth, a portion that's true, but large part of it hindi totoo, no? So, for example, sasabihin, itong taong ito, ay nagkaroon ng ganitong problema. So, totoo, meron siyang ganitong problema. And then, dadagdag nila ngayon, totally false na. And then, they publish it, no? Or they post it on social media. And when people read it, because it sounds true, because there's something there that's partly true, they get misled, no? They get misled. They rely on it. And then, because of social media, napakabilis ikalat, they share it, no? And unfortunately, that's a problem, no? In social media, unlike what we would call traditional media. Siguro traditional media, we can say print, no?
Yeah.
Yung talagang dyaryo na hawak mo. Magazines, no? Hindi na yata masyado uso yun.
What is a newspaper? Physical newspaper.
Yeah, exactly. But unlike traditional media, yung social media kasi walang standards eh. Walang accountability, walang gatekeepers. Kasi it's, for example, Facebook, right? The rule is, my wall, my rules. Kasi account ko yun, right? So, I post whatever I want. I limit whoever I want to read my post, or I open it up to the whole world. So, my wall, my rules. Someone posts something I don't like, I edit it out, I delete it, and I say, my wall, my rules, right? So, if I post something that's not true on my social media page, my wall, my rules, di ba? But in traditional media, you can't get away with that eh. Kasi may editor, may fact checkers, right?
Tama.
So it becomes easier. Another thing kasi sa social media, that's why disinformation becomes a little bit more dangerous, no? Is because when people read social media, they read to be updated. They don't necessarily read in order to know the news, di ba? May saying nga nun, di ba? If it's not on Facebook, it's not official. So when people declare something, di ba? If it's not on Facebook, it's not official. But dun din nagra-rise yung yung influencers eh. Because before the news, no, you get your news from reporters, you get your news from journalists, you get your news from listening to the person on TV news, no? Right now, hindi na eh.
Right.
You get your news from someone who shares an article on his or her Facebook page or Twitter or even Instagram, no? And there are many who are, alam natin to, yung influencers, for example, no?
Right.
Who say something, who express a view or an opinion, and it's carried as if it were news. Nag-overlap na blur, no? At some point, minsan na-obliterate na yung linya between media and traditional media or news and social media, which is basically personal updates. Yun yung mahirap dun eh. Kasi nga wala na yung gatekeeper, wala yung editor, wala yung accountability, walang fact-checkers, no? On social media.
That's really the tricky part. Na you don't, because you're so captivated by this person, because you've followed this person for how many years, and she has not yet released yung mga sikat ngayon, yung I'm sorry I did this vlog, na biglang
Yeah.
magpo-post sila tapos they look super sad because they posted something na controversial na nagkamali sila. Pero we ourselves don't bother to check na, uy, bakit mo yan sinasabi? Sure ka bang totoo yan? And are you even asking the right people? The accountability to know that X million amount of people are watching you and are literally at your beck and call. They will follow whatever you want to say. And that's really, I think, a big thing that people are talking about. Like, how can you hold influencers who have millions of followers accountable when they say, yung balik lang nila is like, oh, this is my channel. Pwede nyo naman ako i-unfollow eh.
That's really true. And at some point the influencers have replaced the primary sources of truth, no? Kasi for example, there are times that in effect parang advertising di ba? You put a movie star, a famous actor and a famous actress, right? You put a famous actor and actress on screen and let that person promote the brand. Benta yan, no? Kasi hindi naman nila tatanungin kung totoo hindi. Kasi alam nila advertisement yon. But let that actor or actress read the news. They'll probably say, sandali, anong credibility niya to read the news, right? Anong credibility niya to report the news? But that line has been blurred Kasi nga ngayon, for example, you have, influencers, celebrity influencers talking about, for example, the pandemic, talking about vaccines, talking about masks. And that's basically the realm of scientists.
Hindi naman sila doktor.
Understandable that no one wants to listen to a boring scientist, right? But, your attention is grabbed by this, great-looking person with a lot of movies, box office appeal, etc., instead of this scientist who doesn't speak very well, no? So yung ganon that's a problem. The truth gets, I think, drowned out in the influencers. No one bothers to check the science. No one bothers to check the primary source, and that's the truth.
That's true.
Ganun yun yung problema.
That's so true. Nagigilty ako minsan. Because I don't like reading. I'm not a reader, and like my whole family knows this. Parang minsan I tell my sister, basahin mo na lang para sa akin, then can you summarize na lang?
and so that's the part where I think, when we don't do our fact checking or truth checking, kasi nga nandun yung celebrity right?
That's so
and so
true.
we have to wonder now, where's the truth there, no? How do we get to the truth behind the information that's being peddled out there effectively?
And how can we be that stopgap? Going back to the topic of disinformation, right? So I'm curious to know, on the law side of things, what does the law have to say about disinformation?
The law does not define it actually as disinformation. The law considers disinformation as an offense, as a crime, only if it falls within libel, no? And libel basically is defamation. If the disinformation injures the reputation of another person, then it becomes libel. If it's done online, it becomes cyber libel. But since not all disinformation is libelous or defamatory, then it's not very easy to hold someone accountable for disinformation. Kasi nga kung kita mo blatant na talaga hindi totoo yung pinost niya. But it doesn't injure someone's reputation, so it can be libel, right? And so the other side of the coin is people will say, well, I have freedom of expression. I have freedom of speech that's guaranteed under the Constitution. Tama din naman yun, no? But the problem there is that when something on social media is posted and government is not involved, then we're not talking about freedom of expression. We're not talking about freedom of speech. That's basically called private speech. And therefore, hindi siya protected, no? So, ang remedy talaga doon is to hold the platform responsible, no? Whatever the platform is, Facebook ba yan, Twitter ba yan, Insta ba yan, no? Hold them responsible by reporting it,
Right.
no? And saying, look, this post came out and this is clearly disinformation and therefore you should take action, no? One example there is Donald Trump, no? Favorite na yung Twitter, second favorite na yung Facebook. dun siya talaga nagsasalita, no? Hindi siya masyadong mas speech, pero grabe yung Twitter niya, no? Sometimes he personally, sometimes yung staff niya. Pero yung laman ng Twitter tsaka Facebook niya, puro, disinformation or attacks, no? Against his political opponents. So of course we know that Donald Trump was suspended initially and then later on banned from both Facebook and Twitter, no? So because they held him accountable for his statements during the January 6 uprising, no, in the Capitol. So I think the remedy here is to say that, no, if someone posts this information and it comes out on your feed, no, kasi someone shared it, we check who posted it first. Sino yung author? And then report it to the platform.
Right.
Kung Facebook ba yan, Instagram or Twitter, and say, look, this person is spreading this information. And therefore, it should violate community standards. Therefore, you should take action. And if, the platform does not take action, then we remind, no? And tell the platform, look, I do not want this information on my social media. We can push that, no? Rather than going to, for example, suing someone, because it's not so clear, because this information isn't a crime by itself. Again, only if it's libelous, then it results in libel. But otherwise, it's not an offense in itself. No?
Right.
And so the remedy really is administrative, going to the site itself and complaining to the site, complaining to the platform. No? So yung mga ganon.
If we can't rely on law, if we can't rely, and if we only have to rely on the platform, tapos sila, obviously, they want to get more people using their platform. So they'll keep, I don't want to say they're accountable to it, but it's fact to a certain degree that they push also this disinformation because this gets them, the viewers, scrolling longer on their app. This gets the social media users to be watching longer videos, spending more hours, etc. And that's what they want. So it's so scary. I so like, minsan you're really at the realms na lang, parang wala ka nang magagawa, di ba?
Alam mo, Martha, that's the function of the algorithm. Yung the one that suggests to you, what to read. And as you say, that's dangerous. Kasi all the social media operates on that day. And you will notice that, di ba? If there's a clickbait and it's disinformation, you click it, you read it, the next thing you will see is that your feed will be flooded already with all of those, no? That's the algorithm.
We're really at the control of these algorithms na once you share certain posts, tatakbo talaga yan, especially if it's disinformation, especially if it has the names of these people, whether you are bashing them or promoting them, campaigning for or against them. That's what we have to realize, that if we want to use social media as a platform, we can also be part of spreading a lie, and we can so easily be part of that because of what we just mentioned. We completely disregard yung totoo ba to at makakasama ba to sa tao. I recently came across, actually, it was mentioned in a talk by Bishop Ambo, and he talks about this information. He pointed out a very interesting point in his talk about how disinformation is actually in the Bible. In Genesis, he mentioned it. So I think we're gonna play that clip right now of Bishop Ambo.
What God called harmful suddenly looked good to Adam and Eve. And what is the result? They ate of it. Why? Because of disinformation. They had been misinformed and, in effect, misled. You see, that's the difference. God never misleads us. Only Satan does. And the result for us is suffering, misery, separation from God, which ultimately means death.
Napaisip ako na, oo nga pala, it's so similar. Yung what happened with Adam and Eve in the garden and how how Bishop Ambo talked about it. And then looking at it now, parang, what? So it's happening again, basically.
That's a very good point, that Bishop Ambo raises in that presentation about how disinformation does not only affect or injure one person, but actually injures others around us. What you were saying earlier, no? That when you share something from social media without verifying anything, without looking to the truth, for example, no? It does not only affect you, but it affects other people as well, no? So, and again, it's unfortunate now that because of the rise of social media, the focus on influencers rather than on the gatekeepers of information, no? It's no longer really about truth, no? It's no longer about truth telling. It's more about engagement, no? It's how many people will share it, how many people will like it, how many people will comment on it, as opposed to how many people will actually read it and try to, come up with thoughts about what they read.
Parang we're controlled by technology na talaga, even with the information that we use. I don't like being not in control. I don't want to say na, pabayaan na lang natin. Kasi kung papabayaan ko, the older generation, hindi na kayo buhay pag time ko na. So it's my time to... That's why we want to be more vocal about it. That's why we're having discussions like this, right? And learning how something as simple as, this is my opinion, this is my wall, this is my post, I can say whatever I want, can lead to fake news, but more importantly, disinformation. So my question to myself now actually is, and what I've really been challenging all my friends also is, how can we make what is truth come out? One thing that I do if I see a post that is very triggering, na parang tama ba to? I Google it. Simple. I check also the links na parang sino ba to? Sino nag-post nito? Ano yung page niya? Ano yung iba niyang mga post? Another thing, very easy. All the Viber groups that my mom's part of, if it says lang, forwarded from a friend. Sino tong friend? Hindi natin alam. Hindi natin alam na finorward na siya ng finorward. Hindi na siya friend. Parang acquaintance na siya. Diba? So, figure out, ask them, who is this person? Who is your source? And last is check the date. Minsan, madalas binabump up yung mga old posts na, or they reuse a photo that was used in 2016, 2015, na hindi mo na yan maiisip. Google is your best friend. And Google, click the right sources on Google. Okay, Ted, last question for us. What about the most triggering people? The ones who really incite disinformation. How do we deal with trolls? Nakakagalit talaga sila, but how can we deal with them?
Totoo yun. The first thing we do to deal with trolls is don't feed them. Don't even refer to them. Don't use their photos. Don't even acknowledge them. No, don't mention their names. No, if they're actual persons, if they're avatars, even so. No matter what they do. Kasi they work on that. They know the algorithm. They know the tactic. They will get engagements. They will trigger people, and people will react. People will react angrily, or they will make fun. They will ridicule. No. Because the story is so ridiculous, no? So, again, the simplest thing to do is report, no? Report them to the platform, demand that the platform will take action. Engaging with trolls, no, is foolish, eh. It's a fool's errand, no? Kasi hindi mo papalitan yung isipan nila kasi karamihan sa mga trolls, no, are paid, no? Trabaho nila 'yon, no? To do that, to post that. And so, but for those that who genuinely share the beliefs and are engaging in troll-like behavior, yung nang-aaway sa post, nagko-comment, nang sa slander, no? Or worse, no? Nagte-threaten doon sa mga posts, no? Again, engaging with them will only give them what they want, no? Which is to have more engagement, and then they will bring in more trolls, no? So, and shaming them in public will only guarantee that they will continue with their behavior. Kasi nga, alam nila yun eh. That's what they want to trigger. So again, the best way would be to report them. Pero if you have, if you know these people, no, unfortunately, if you have friends who are engaged in troll-like behavior, no, reach out in private, talk to them, no, and say, wag naman ganyan, no, wag naman ganyan. So many times I've done that. Someone posts a troll-like behavior on my on my Facebook post, for example, and I keep my Facebook posts private only to friends. So alam ko, kakilala ko siya, no? I will let that person know first. Sabihin ko, ita-take down ko yung post mo ha, kasi bastos yung post mo or hindi relevant yung post mo at nakakagalit. So, but I will let that person know and then I will take it down, no? Kasi my wall, my rules, right? But I don't engage. Hindi ko siya papahiyain, hindi ko man siya i-acknowledge, hindi ko siya i-reply eh. And that's also what I do on Twitter, no? So yeah, that's how you engage with trolls. Don't feed them.
Don't engage. And if you want to learn, if they are your friends and you want to learn about how to talk to them and not ruin the friendship, they can even backtrack to our past episode about how to talk to people about different difficult conversations with Coach Aldem. And there's a lot to learn there, especially if we want to have more discussions with people that are close to us, that are part of the people spreading misinformation or disinformation. So have those conversations in private and don't feed the trolls. So thanks, Ted, for that. And for all the tips and all the insights you've shared for us in this episode. The question is that I'd like to leave everyone with is, where's the truth now? And we have to know that the truth is at our hands and we have the power to bring it out. Again, I am Martha Estrada and we hope to see you again in our next episode of Lex Dei Podcast, where we ask tough questions and get real answers.
If you love the truth, you will fight for the truth. I'm Ted. Thank you, Martha. It's so nice to have this conversation with you about truth-telling, social media, and disinformation.
If you have other topics or questions that you'd like us to discuss, especially surrounding the upcoming elections, feel free to send us a message on Lex Dei Podcast on Facebook or Instagram. And we're actually also on YouTube. And if you like this episode, please feel free to share it with a friend. Be the person that spreads truth by encouraging other people to share what is truthful as well. Share it with a friend and don't forget to like and subscribe. Follow us on all our social media platforms. We're on Facebook, Instagram, YouTube, and Spotify called Lex Dei Podcast.